It all starts with C. Yes, it all starts with the letter C. Do you see the C? Yes, I do. It's right here. In fact, I also see D, E, F, G, A, B. Congratulations, you now know all the white keys on a piano. And you might be thinking, what about this key right here? Well, that's also a C. And maybe this key right beside the C right here, well, that's also a B. So yes, at some point it does just loop back around. So how do you tell the difference between the C down here and the C up here? Obviously they sound different, but I mean, how do you distinguish them? Well, one is an octave higher than the other. Okay, an octave is when a key is the same note, but they're different sounding. More specifically, this C right here has half the frequency of this C, but it has double the frequency of this C. And you might be wondering, what about these black keys up here? I see them, but they haven't been touched yet, and they won't be touched yet. Okay, I lied. I'll touch them just a little bit. This is C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. They're also referred to as flats depending on the context, but just for now, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to refer to them as sharp notes. So now you know all the notes on a piano. Yes, this series of notes is the same as this series of notes, but it's at a higher frequency, and these series of notes are the same as this series of notes, but at a lower frequency, more specifically half the frequency. You might be wondering to yourself why there are 7 white keys and 5 black keys. I'm not really sure of the answer to that myself, but I think it is for the sake of organization. For example, if we go back to our white keys, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, that is the most important scale you're going to learn. It's the C major scale. And just because you play all the white keys on the piano doesn't necessarily mean they're of an equal distance. You might notice E and F don't have a little black key in between there, and B and C also miss a little thing right there. What I mean is that even though physically D and E and F are an even distance away from each other on a piano, sonically they have a different distance away from each other. And to elaborate, the distance between D and E is a whole step, and the distance between E and F is a half step, and it's just because of this little black key right here. And most scales you are going to learn, just because they follow an alphabetical order does not necessarily mean they have an even distance. A half step is basically the distance it takes to travel to a note that you're beside. The distance it takes to get to the D sharp to the D note is a half step, but sometimes we want to get to the E note without having to travel to the D note. This is when we introduce the whole step, so now we can travel from D to E. And the major scale consists of multiple whole steps and half steps that collaborate with each other to create this pattern. We start with C, then go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And now that you know the C major scale from C to B, I want you to assign a number to each individual note. So C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, so on and so forth. And you'll see why you want to assign numbers to these letters, but for now I want to introduce a secret little code. It's called 135. So you remember those numbers we assigned. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we play all of these notes together, we have a C major chord. So you might be thinking a chord is when you play multiple notes on a scale. For now, I'm going to say yes, but it can get out of control really fast. But for now, I want to look at the A note. I mean, it's the first letter of the alphabet. I mean, why is it like the 6th number here? That's actually a very important number in terms of music theory, because if we play this front to back within the range of the C major scale, that's an A minor scale. Yeah, C major and A minor are the same exact scale, but they take a different journey to get to point A to point B. And because they have a different journey, they end a different way. You might notice A minor sounds a lot more moody. Ooh, that's a bit strange. Anyways, you might remember the journey of the major scale. Starting at C, you got whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Pretty easy to follow, right? But then you get to A, and it's a bit strange. You start at A, but then whole step, immediately jump to a half step, another half step, whole step, whole step. You might notice the difference between the first and last note on a major scale is a half step, but when you get to over here, the distance is a whole step. I mean, that's why I think it sounds different, at least at the end there. But I want you to take that 1, 3, 5 pattern and just hold it there. And bring your hand over to the A note. So that way you have 6, 1, and 3. That is a minor chord. It is a minor chord. You might be wondering, even though my hand is the exact same shape, when I drag it over here and play something, it sounds kind of different. And that is because of the third. Not necessarily the third note played in a major chord, but just the third note in the scale. So I'm talking about this middle thing right here. Taking a journey, you start at C, and to get to the third, you go 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. But to get to the minor chord, the minor third, you start at A, and it only takes 1, 2, 3 notes. And that's kind of just what makes it different. It's a shorter distance between your first and your third. And you might notice, if you play every note front to back, they'll have a different pattern just because of the series of whole notes and half notes it takes to get to point A to point B. Because of that, each number assigned has its own name or a mode. And the best way I can describe it is that they're scales within a scale. For example, on the major scale, the number 1 we established on C is referred to as the Ionian mode. The second mode is referred to as the Dorian mode. The third is Phrygian. The fourth is Lydian, the fifth is Mixolydian, the sixth is Aeolian, but it also functions as the minor scale, and the seventh mode is also referred to as the Locrian mode, but it's also the scariest just because of how it functions. Now, in the context of the major scale, the Locrian mode chord doesn't sound that bad on paper, but if we tried to play this pattern over here, it would sound like this. Not very nice. Not very nice at all. Now, if we use the 1-3-5 pattern on all of our modes, remember we're still in the C major scale. Let's say I want to play them in a different order. I want to spice things up a bit. Maybe instead of starting at 1, I want to start at 2. And maybe I want to jump to 5. And maybe I want to go to 3 and 4. That is a chord progression. Now, what gives chord progressions their voice is how they speak. For example, the number 2, if we notice the distance between 1 and 3, that's only 3 notes, so it speaks in minor. But our 5, the distance between notes is 4 notes. So some of these chords are major and some of these chords are minor. To help further distinguish this, let's take our numbers, make them into Roman numerals, capitalize the major chords, and decapitalize the minor chords. Well, I understand the difference between the 1 and 6 needing their own mode, but the 5 is the exact same chord as the 1. Why does it need its own mode? And it's when you get further down the line. More specifically, when we add more notes to a chord. Let's add another number to the pattern. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is a C major 7. Oh, doesn't that sound so sweet? Okay, now let me just try using the same pattern on the Mixolydian. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now that is a G7 chord, not a G major 7 specifically, but just G7. Because it's not major, but it's not exactly minor either. Speaking of, this is what an A minor 7 sounds like. Basically, if a C major sounds like this, a C7 sounds like that. If you want to distinguish a major chord and a minor chord, you'll notice it's within the 3, but these 2 notes actually stay the same. What I'm saying is that the 1 and 5th, even though they're far apart physically, they're actually kind of best friends with each other. People realized this and they decided to make a graph out of it called the circle of fifths. And basically the notes beside each other on the circle of fifths are kind of good friends with each other, while the notes further away, they're kind of distant. Not as well known. The best way to put it is that if your head is a C note, it's a lot easier to touch your head with your G note hand than it is with your D flat foot. But you can also see the similarities between these notes if you look at their scales, so we're actually going to learn a new scale. So if you remember the whole step, half step pattern of the C major scale, we're going to use that same pattern, but starting from the G note. Okay, so starting from G, you have whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's a new note. That's the F sharp. We just jumped over F and have an F sharp now. Oh my gosh, that's what makes them so different. That's what makes them so different. And now that you know the G major scale, I mean the same rules pretty much apply. Remember 1, 3, 5, that's your G major scale. And if you go to the 6, it's still a minor voicing, but our 5th, wait a minute. The D, that used to be a D minor on the C major scale, but now it's a D major on this scale? What the? And yes, because D is the 5th note on the G major scale, it's G's neighbor in the circle of fifths. You know, might as well just go to the D major scale since we have it. Okay, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Oh my gosh, there's another sharp note. It's C sharp. Everyone, it's C sharp. They joined the party. And if you're paying good attention, the 5th note on the D major major scale is an A. So we've been so focused on this whole A minor scale, why not learn the A major scale? I mean, we started A, then you do another whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, another sharp note, and it's G sharp this time. Oh my gosh. And yes, you remember how the A chord on the C major scale was minor? Well, now it is major. And C doesn't even exist on the A major scale, so it can just scram. Hey, you want to learn something crazy? What if I played the A major, but I played it in a different order? What if I didn't want to start at A? I wanted to start at C sharp and work my way towards A. So instead of sounding like, it'll sound like. So it gives it a little bit different of a voicing. That is called an inversion, and what I played specifically is a first inversion. So again, I want to play A major, but I want to start at E, so it'll sound something like this. And that's the second inversion. Basically, it has the same functionality as your A major scale, but if you want to give it a little bit more spice, a little black pepper, that's a good way to add some spice. And there are different rules for different chords. You know, there's only been major and minor so far. What if I want to play something different? What if instead of 1, 3, 5, I can change it up and do 1, 2, 5? Well, that's a suspended second, and this is a suspended fourth. And also, there's not just a major scale, there are different scales out there. For example, the pentatonic scale makes the major scale look a lot less threatening by using 5 notes instead of 7. Get it? Pentatonic. Anyways, it sounds like this. A good frame of reference for the pentatonic scale is actually the F major scale. Alright, now just take away all of the white notes. So if the major scale is used to represent all of the white notes, I think the black keys represent the pentatonic scale quite well. And the great thing about the pentatonic scale, you can't play bad ever, you can mesh however much you want, and it just... It sounds good inherently. It just inherently sounds good. And in my opinion, this sounds better than this. And I actually forgot, if you want to know the difference between a sharp note and a flat note, for example, F sharp major, it's technically called a G flat major just because it already has an F in the scale. So just so it doesn't take up the same space on a piece of sheet music, this would have been called a G flat. Anyways, the only thing left to do is practice, make chords, inversions. I don't care what you do as long as you're just doing it and having fun. And this isn't exactly a scholarly video on how to learn music theory. This is just how I learned it and applied it to how I make music. So chances are there might be a professional musician or a jazz professor who want to strangle me right now, but this is how I learned music theory, and I think I did pretty good for myself. And that's all the music theory I think you need, at least. It's all the music theory I need to make stuff, so if this helps you, good. Bye. Alright, you learn music theory.